Christianity and Islam are the two largest worldviews on the planet. We host real, honest conversations about the world's most important issues.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
So I start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. And that's in peace and blessings upon Prophet Muhammad, his family and his companions, upon all the prophets, peace be upon them all. With the rules of food in Islam, I would say there's one fundamental principle that all the rules and laws of food, and that is that it's in the Quran. God says about the Prophet that he permits all that is good and pure, and he forbids all that is evil or all that is bad. وَيُحِلُّ لَهُمُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ وَيُحَرِّمُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْخَبَائِثِ. That's the verse of the Quran, which it means that the Prophet will permit any food that is pure and good, and he will forbid any food that is bad and harmful. And so that's the rule that Islam follows, that food is, anything that is good, that is healthy, that is beneficial, Islam is going to permit it. Unless there's some specific text to say like, oh no, this specific, food or type of food you can't eat, then we don't eat it. And we have this faith that, oh, this is forbidden because there is some harm in it, right? And so although we might not understand our harm, we believe that God in his infinite knowledge is forbidding this type of food because there's some harm in it for us. And so that's the general rule. And then once we take this rule, we look towards like the specific evidences of Quran and also prophetic statements of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and we see like what objects did they prohibit. And so the scholars, they say the rule that we default to is that all food is permissible, except the specific ones that Revelation is specifically prohibited. And so when a Muslim approaches food, he approaches it with the idea that this is permissible, unless I find something telling me I can't eat it. So you can approach it with like two ways. Or you can say, oh, I can't eat this until I have proof that it's okay, right? Or you can be like, well, I can eat anything I want unless there's proof telling me that I can't eat it, right? Some Muslims have the misunderstanding they think it's the first way, that oh, you can't eat it unless there's something specifically that says, oh, it's allowed, right? And that's wrong. That's a misunderstanding that people might have. But the actual default rule is that you can eat anything you want, and unless there's something of the Quran and Sunnah, the prophetic tradition to specify that object, or to specify that food. And so food is permissible. Anything that is good is permissible, except that which is specifically defined. What are some of the things that are mentioned in the Quran that are like very repetitively mentioned? Alcohol for sure is something that the Quran mentions very clearly. And it went through stages, because when the revelation first started, the Meccan community were a community that consumed alcohol. And so the verses of Quran first prohibited drinking alcohol, coming to prayer intoxicated. And then later on, the rules gradually forbade the entire consumption of alcohol and commanded the Muslims to abstain from it. And so from there, the Muslims have unanimously agreed upon this understanding of the tradition. They said that all of the previous verses that permitted some form of consuming alcohol were abrogated, and that the final ruling of Islam is that alcohol that is prohibited. And with that, the scholars also deduced that anything that intoxicates is also prohibited. All right, so like for example, let's say a lot of modern forms of drugs and so on, anything that intoxicates the mind, and they say this is a form of alcohol, although it might not be the literal alcohol drink, but it has the same effects or worse, right? And so they say any type of thing that intoxicates the mind, or that it affects the stability and the clarity of the mind, is prohibited. And so under this, you have forms of drugs, even weed, right? And so all of these different things or consumptions that people drink or eat or smoke for entertainment is permissible. I'm sorry, it's prohibited.
You heard it here, guys.
No way. Okay,
I'm
yeah.
gonna edit that and use it as a commercial.
Yep. So all that is prohibited, right? And then a few other items that the Quran mentions are dead animals. Anything that has died before slaughtering is also prohibited. Animals that are generally, majority of animals are permissible to eat. But if it's not slaughtered, and we'll talk about like who has to slaughter and some rules of slaughtering, but generally any animal that is dead before slaughtering, then that animal is prohibited and cannot be consumed, even if it's a chicken or a goat or anything that we commonly eat. It must be sacrificed. It must be killed by way of slaughter. Its cause of death can be electrocution or something else. Another rule that we follow are also that is Quran clearly defines as pig. We can't eat pig. And I think that's common knowledge. Like, I think all Muslims, regardless of like how much they practice Islam, 99% of the time, like they won't touch pig. That's like one of the things that no one will compromise on, right?
Even people who drink, they were like, no pork.
Yeah, no pork, right? So that's kind of it's something interesting. I don't know what the cause for it is. But there's this, just a very bad, or kind of just like this fear of like eating pig or pork, and more than alcohol. All right, so you'll find Muslims that might consume alcohol, although it's prohibited, and the sin is maybe as equal as eating pork, right? It's not like, oh, this is worse than the other, but they'll do this, but they won't do that, right? So, but anyways, pork is prohibited. And then another thing that is mentioned in the prophetic tradition are animals that have that hunt with their claws, or that have claws, or fangs, and so any animal that has fangs or claws is prohibited, and so lions, tigers, predators, primarily you can say. That hunt other animals that eat meat primarily. Not every single one, but these animals are prohibited. Birds, hawks, eagles, and so forth are prohibited. So these are some of the, specific types of animals that were mentioned. Another general rule that applies also is anything that harms the human body. And this can be also unique from case by case. So if I'm allergic, let's say to I don't know, let's say honey, right? And let's say honey is permissible. There's prophetic tradition that talks about the benefits of honey and so forth. But let's say I have a certain allergic reaction to honey, and so honey would be prohibited for myself, and it would be a sin on me to consume honey if I know that my body can't eat. It harms my body.